welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. I am Scott McMahon, and I'm excited about this Saturday evening broadcast. I've got Matt Wilk. I'm about to bring him on. First, I'm going to just kind of set the stage just a little bit. Here in Michigan, there is a proposal, and it's not unique to Michigan. There's one that's already on the ballot in Nebraska, and Governor DeSantis in Florida is pushing something similar through a legislative process, which is an abolishment of local property taxes. And here in Michigan, it's called AxMITax. And I got into a little bit of a row with some of the promoters of AxMITax this week on X. And Matt chimed in a little bit, and I texted him real quick and said, hey, do you want to come on and talk about AxMITax? And so with no further ado, thank you, Matt, so much for saying yes and joining. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. So
thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So the argument, and I've been, trying to, I went directly to Carla Wagner, who's the founder of AxMITax, and James Dixon, who was promoting it. And I was saying, okay, well, how do you intend to fund local government? The problem that I have, first of all, let me just kind of say I almost view it personally. I am a county commissioner, and this isn't about like any sort of benefit that I get. I work out in my county commissioners are very low paid, and I work it out. I make less than $15 an hour for the time that I give. This isn't about like money. It's not about personal benefit, but it is about, and the whole reason why I'm doing this is just to better understand how local government works. And so in that process, what I'm seeing, and we're going through the budgeting process right now, and if we lose our autonomy over local government, and we become more beholden than we already are to the state, because already we are very dependent on the state and federal government to just balance our budget every year. We get a lot of grants from the state and federal government, and all of those grants have strings attached, and that's just the way it is. It's really ultimately about control. And so I'm very concerned about losing control, and we'll talk more about that as we get into this. But Matt, I'd really like to know kind of your view on this. We talked about this earlier, that there's some similarities between this and other kind of similar and misguided movements in the past. What is your opinion, just overall, like what is your view on AxMITax, and why do you think that it's a good or a bad idea?
Well, I would start with this. I think the people that are running this particular thing and supporting it, I think they are good people. I think they have well-intentioned thoughts. I think taxes are too high, and I think we need to do whatever we can to reduce taxes. I think this particular proposal has really kind of three main flaws. First of all, the math is bad. Okay, the math is no good, and we can go through that in particular. And when you look at it, it's not particularly close either. And by frame of reference, I was my school board treasurer for about 6 years. So you know where the sources of revenue for schools in particular come from. And some is the state school aid fund, and some is local taxes, and you can tell the difference. The second one is the one you alluded to about local control. Okay. Any process that pushes the decision making about revenue sources further away from you to Lansing or to Washington is one that is going to get more bloated and be less responsive to people. That is just axiomatic to anything.
Yep.
If I walk into my township office and say, hey, I got this issue, you know what they're going to do? They're going to sit with me and talk with me. At Wayne County, probably not. Lansing, no way. Washington, they'll probably have me arrested. So it doesn't, pushing it further away doesn't work. So that's really the second thing. And the third thing is, it's not an optimal strategy to obtain what you want. And there is one out there, and it's one that we should undertake. And it's been done before by some serious people successfully across the country. That's where our focus should be. And we can talk about that too.
Great. And I definitely agree with you that I think taxes need to be cut, and that's a big part of the reason why why I ran for county commissioner, is I want to try to find a way that we can put more money back in taxpayers' pockets and see where there's waste and see where we can reduce our budget locally. Because I think local government also is a microcosm of state government and federal government, and so for me to be somebody who talks about political issues and government, I think this is it's been very valuable for me to understand how this works locally. But um, we have a I would love to see, like, if AxMITax were about cutting state income tax and prohibiting and abolishing state income tax, I'd be all for it. I really would, because on the state level, when you cut on the state level, it's not going to hurt the community. It's still going to hurt local government, but it's not going to prevent us from having local control. And I think that the biggest illustration that I think is so important to me, and I think to a lot of people, is when we look back at COVID, there were some counties whose sheriff said, "I'm going to enforce these unconstitutional mandates that were coming from Whitmer," and others that said that they were not. And I am part of the reason why I choose to live in the county that I live in Lapeer County, is we have a fantastic sheriff who said, "I am not going to enforce any of these. You are free to go about your business and live your lives as the Constitution deems that you should." And
Wild.
and and that and I don't know how many other counties there were like that, but I was very grateful to live in this county during that. And so that we there are many counties where they followed the orders, and you weren't allowed to go visit your family members, and and
Correct.
you weren't allowed
Correct.
to
I did
cut.
spend some time in a nursing home, and I had to talk to him through a phone through a window.
Yeah,
And he said, "Son, this is like jail." I said, "I know it is, Pop."
so
So
horrible.
yeah, I get it.
So
And,
sorry.
and like I said, the concept, just conceptually, think about it for a second. Do you think that money is going to come from the state government to local government without strings?
Right, exactly.
Really? Why do you think that? Like, has that been done before? So we can go into the details of the program if you'd like. I'm happy to talk through it. Like
Yeah,
I said, I have a finance background. I was my board treasurer for 6 years, so I can talk pretty confidently about how the whole thing works if you'd like.
yeah, fantastic. Let me pull up. I did a search just for like the main points, um, and let me pull it up here. Okay, so the main points, how AxMITax proposes to fund local governments, and number one, to shift revenues into a state pool. So to take money from sales tax, income tax, and excise taxes, which are also called sin taxes, on marijuana, alcohol, tobacco, and that currently go to the state, and then increase the amount of those state collected taxes routed to local governments. So instead of roughly 15% of those taxes that currently goes to local governments now, it'd be they're suggesting raising it to 20%. And then it bans, ultimately bans all local tax millages, and the millages are the things that voters have approved and voted for that fund schools, libraries, sheriffs, any special, and it's county by county, and it's been up to the local taxpayers there to and voters to decide that. And then fourth, increase strict tax increase rules. So they say local tax increases require 60% voter approval in order to pass. And so it hampers, what it does is it takes the money away from the revenue generation away from the county, puts it to the state, and through primarily income tax and sales tax. So they're going to
Mhm.
have to raise state income taxes to do that. And then it's the state that is determining how that money is going to go back to counties and municipalities and school boards and school districts.
Correct.
And then it tells counties and municipalities, you can't raise any taxes yourselves unless you have 60% of your voters that approve it.
Right.
And so the result of this is ultimately it's I mean it, and like you said, the math is bad,
Well,
but
it bears talking about. It bears
right,
talking about the math and why it's so bad.
yeah,
Okay, so I'm looking to my right. I have their language, and they're going to basically bump up current revenue sharing for city, township, and village from 10% to 13.3, and then for counties from 0 to 6.67. That's a collective increase of 10%.
mhm,
Okay, um, and then they're going to say. Um, That's funded from state sales tax. Okay. Now, they're going to make up for everything else by shifting 10% of state income and excise tax to local government. All right, ready? So 10% of sales tax now, right? More, and 10% of I'm sorry, 10% of income, 10% of income, 10% across the board, 10%
Right.
across the board. Make it easy. Okay, so how much revenue in the last revenue conference did the state collect in sales, income, and excise tax? Okay, that's not very difficult to find. Okay,
Right.
that is from the House Fiscal Agency, right? They do it every year. They do a consensus revenue conference. This is what they are going to come up with. The total is, give or take, say 26 or 27 billion dollars, maybe 28 on a good day.
Okay.
Okay, so 10% of that is 2.8 billion dollars on a good day.
Right.
How much property tax was collected in the state of Michigan last year? The answer is $17 billion. So your proposal is to replace $17 billion with $2.8 billion.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a thing. Now, here's the other one that's crazy about it. Of some of those numbers, that is the total number, total revenue, including restrictions. So recall that voters in the state of Michigan have said previously, hey, we want X to go to Y, we want this to go to that. For example, gas taxes go to roads. Okay. So they're in the state, and I'll tell you exactly where this comes from. So, excuse me.
Bless you.
So people look, and I watched a presentation where one of the organizers of this said, the state budget is $80 billion. They can find savings. Okay, fair. Okay, you think you can find
Mm-hmm.
savings. However, half of that budget is Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
If you find, and this is important for people to know, if you find savings in Medicaid, you don't get to spend the rest of the money elsewhere. Okay? If you find savings in Medicaid, the money goes back to Washington, D.C. Matt, there's no incentive to save money in Medicaid? Answer, yes, true. It's exactly why all those rules have to come from the feds to the states. Hey, you can only spend it this way. Exhibit A, Medi-Cal, which is California's Medicare program, giving free medical care to illegal immigrants. Okay, so
Right.
when California kicks illegal immigrants off of Medicaid rather, which they'll have to do in the coming year, do they then get the money to spend elsewhere?
Mm-hmm.
They do not. Okay, that is the total budget. Okay, the total amount of revenue across everything is about half that. Say 40 billion. 40 billion is a nice, easy number to remember. Okay, of that, about a third of that is what are called state restricted funds. Biggest one of those being gas taxes. Gas taxes are used for roads. Your car registration is used for roads. Does somebody think we should spend less money on roads and pump the savings into something else? I don't. And again, I'm
No.
going to say this 4 or 5 times. I think the people that are running this are good people. I think they are trying very hard. I think their hearts are in the right place. I think they are misguided. Okay. That's one of them. All right. So a third of the remainder, right? So a third, half is Medicaid. A third is the school aid fund. All right. The school aid fund is funded by a bunch of different sources. Among them are your 6%, your 6 mil property tax, which, by the way, makes
Mm-hmm.
up about, give or take, say, somewhere between 10% and 20% of your overall tax bill. My tax bill, it's a little greater than 10%. 6 mils on 53 is what I pay, depending on where you are. Okay. So property taxes, by and large I mean 90+%, don't go to the state to dictate what to do with it.
Right.
They're kept locally.
Mhm.
Okay. But let's go back to our math again. So there's the school aid fund, sixth, third of the half. And then the remainder of that third of a half is the unrestricted funds, the general fund. Okay. The general fund in the state of Michigan, and this is on page, say, what are we on here? 8 of the House Fiscal Agency report, is about $14 billion. That is the unrestricted general fund. Okay. So if you wanted to cut state spending, and what I have been told is our plan is to force the state to cut spending so they could fund local governments. Let's put aside the fact whether they would, and let's just stick it whether they can. Well, they'd have to cut it entirely. They would have to take 14 and make it past 0 to -3 just to break even.
That's
It's
right.
not mathematically possible. And I appreciate it. I appreciate the effort. I wish they would focus their energies, which are substantial, and their volunteer hours, which are substantial, on something that might work.
Yep.
This is not one of those things.
And that's exactly what I was trying to tell Carla is we need to, educate your followers, educate your people on how to go and talk to your school board, talk to your city council, talk to your county commission to encourage them to cut taxes. And we're in our budgeting here in Lapeer County. We're in our budgeting process. And I have yet to have a single one of my constituents come to me and say, "Hey, I really want you to cut our taxes. I really want you to work to try to find budget cuts so that we can cut taxes." No one has. And it's the same with the other commissioners. I voted actually to not raise our property taxes a few weeks ago. I was the only one out of 7 Republicans. We're all Republicans on our county commission. I was the only one that voted no on that, or
Right.
to not raise our taxes. And it's because the public's not getting involved. They just don't seem to care. But they
Well,
do care about this utopian magic bullet solution that they're super super passionate about, that is property taxes are evil and therefore they need to be abolished.
look, I will say this. I have worked, I do a lot of work in school board stuff, and I've worked very closely with some people who have been instrumental in defeating ridiculous school board millages over the years.
Right.
Okay. It is done, it can be done. And what you can do by winning those cases is to make your school district or your local government become more transparent. When I was on my school board, we put our check register on the internet, okay, on our website. If a teacher was getting a $50 reimbursement for Panera that she bought for her classroom, someone could see it.
Mhm.
And when we provide that level of transparency, a lot of people go, okay. Now, we put some people dig through it. My job was to dig through it. And
Yeah.
2 separate instances, I found some fraud, right? And that one ended up with a pretty messy situation, and the other one was handled a little differently. But you can find those things. So, but
Mhm.
here's the important thing: in your locality, right? Your township, your village, your city, your county, all of those property taxes must be reviewed and voted on by the voters periodically.
Mhm.
That's different from income tax, right? Your
Right.
income tax rate, I don't remember voting on taking it from 4 to 6. It was 1994, okay? But I have voted in a ton of little elections. Are you going to vote for this renewal or that renewal or whatever? And in the last cycle, about this was the May election, about half of new issuances, not renewals, new issuances were turned down, including one that was about $250 million in Saginaw. And it
Mhm.
deserved to be turned down because the district was not forthright about what they were doing with the money, and you get better control. Example, I think, is Taylor. Taylor went out and passed a bond for about $30 million to build a new school. Only after they passed the bond and issued the bonds did they realize the school cost about $50 million to build.
Wow.
They had to tuck tail. They should never, none of those people on their board or in their administration should ever be part of a bond issuance again. Okay.
Right.
You don't have, but you can handle that locally. You can win those local elections. The further away you are, the harder it is. right? So now you're going to convince the state to cut waste. How?
Right.
Right? So, like,
Oh
local
yeah.
control is a
So
major issue.
yeah. So just to simplify and kind of uh, summarize what you just said. So there's $17 billion right now collected in Michigan in property taxes,
Correct.
and the vast majority of that stays local.
Correct.
Some of it goes back up to the state, but the vast majority of it stays local. And so that's $17 billion of money that funds counties, cities, townships, schools, um, sheriff's departments, local stuff, roads, drain commissions, all that stuff.
Right.
And so they're wanting to take away that $17 billion. They're saying that the they're going to fund it. They're going to make up for that $17 billion shortfall by increasing the allotment of state sales tax revenue by 10%, which would at best provide $2.8 billion. So
Sales,
that
sales, income, and excise
sale,
combined is
so
about
all that's all combined. Okay,
that's all combined. The
so
total is about 28 billion in
right,
revenue from those revenue from those
right,
taxes. So 10% of that,
right,
2.8.
right.
Right. So
So
it's just
it's
not.
all
I
those
mean,
things, right?
I
It's
get
all
it.
those things combined.
I do. I get it. I
so
really
so there's
do.
no more, like, it's where else does the money come from? The only way that it would happen, because so I mean, is counties and townships and school boards would have to actually do their own sales tax,
Right.
or sales tax or income tax. But this this
Which they don't have
measure
the authority
also,
to do. Which they don't have the authority to do under schools. Do not have the authority to do that under state law. You could do I don't believe a sales tax is permitted by a locality under state law. It would require everyone to do an income tax on their own. But schools would be, I don't know what they
so
would do. That would gash their revenue. Again, when we
right.
think about it
Mhm,
practically, like, you're going to walk in and say, these are the parts of our government that we like, right?
mhm,
I like my roads being fixed. That's good. When I go out on my street and I see them fixing a road that had a pothole, thumbs up. Good job. You know what I like? I like my parks. I like my local police and fire. I like my, parks and rec department, right? All those things that are funded locally. And I will tell you, I sat, I don't know how many years ago, on my parks and rec board, and they did a big kind of shift of who was sort of running the show, to the tune of saving about $500,000. And that was real money, real savings. And what that did is, we're not going back to people and saying, hey, we need more and more and more. We've got, now we can handle cost increases, wage increases, stuff like that, through those cost savings we've obtained locally under local pressure,
mhm,
right? I'm not going to work to save money in Northfield Township so that it can be spent up in the UP or in Grand Rapids or in Detroit or anywhere else, right? So
right,
now there's, and that works both ways, I'm sure, right? So any incentive to cut costs is now pushed away and diluted, and it's just not there. That's just not how the system works.
right, right. And and it's taking that energy away. And we've got Rob Namowicz saying, he's giving us all these questions about, how many employees does MDEC pay every week? How many airplanes does the state of Michigan operate every day? I mean, so
I can give an answer. I can give
go
you an
ahead,
answer.
go
It's
ahead.
not $17 billion.
Right, exactly,
Not $17
exactly.
billion. Okay.
And
100% of the money that is spent unrestricted in the general fund is not all waste. There's a
right,
lot of waste elsewhere in other places. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But think about it this, I'll answer directly, Rob. Think about it this, Rob. The person whose job it is to cut that, okay, to look at those planes or employees or whatever you're raising, I get it 100%. The person whose job it is to do that has no incentive to do that if that money doesn't stay where they are.
mhm,
They have an incentive. Look what happened yesterday. Was it yesterday with the State Department, where they cut like 2% of employees, and it was tears flowing,
right,
signs, and this and that, because they all think whatever they're doing is important,
right,
right? So
right,
now you have these government agencies, and Those are now further away from you. They're now in
Mhm.
Lansing, and they report to 10 million people, not the 25,000 people that are in my township.
That's right.
Okay? And that same decision has to be made, and they have to listen to you less. They have no incentive to cut those costs, and now they don't have to listen to you.
Right.
So if you want to dig into your local government, and I encourage it, dig into your local government and see what they're spending the money on and say, hey, I'll give you a great example. In the township south of mine, they have a splash pad. And if I recall the story correctly, there was going to be some problem and it was going to cost $325,000 to fix. And election comes, new supervisor's like, no, wait a minute. That seems like a lot. Pulls the brakes on, gets it repaired for a significant discount. Significant discount. Do you think that's happening in Lansing? Or do you think
No.
they're spending the
Right.
$325,000 and not even thinking about it? Because they have no incentive to do so. Difference is he had an incentive. He lives there. It's his tax
Mhm.
dollars.
Mhm.
He can say, I'm not spending my money that way.
Right.
Right. So those are all great things. Cutting costs is the way you attack the problem that's a huge part of it. Go to the spending side. Go to the spending side. Force your legislators to vote that way. Force your local governments to run lean. Right? Are all your in Wayne in Wayne County, for example, our county commissioners, they got a pretty hefty salary. Why? Why?
Right.
Why? What are you doing? You meet once a month, I think,
Right.
right?
Right.
But they do. And if we had control of Wayne County, which we do not, and I say we, I mean people in Western Wayne County, we could
Mhm.
go in and make changes, right?
Mhm.
My township, I can make changes. You
Right.
think I'm making changes in Lansing?
No.
Not happening. Not happening.
And
Great, but
and
great. Again, you're doing the right thing. Your ideas are correct. Yes,
sure.
that the incentive to
And
start Lansing of
exactly.
money.
That's
Correct.
right.
Correct. And that's gonna get to
That
my
right.
fourth point. That is my fourth point.
Okay. Which is what I said earlier too. Is I would support a abolition of state income tax.
Correct.
And I'm all for starving Lansing or causing forcing some really institutional changes in Lansing, but when you start harming local governments, it is completely different because it's the local government that is actually our line of defense against tyranny. If just Rob, I would encourage you to think about, or anybody listening, to think about when back, if you're in Michigan, when Gretchen Whitmer was imposing all of these absolutely tyrannical mandates in 2020, and if you had no sheriff and you're the only police in town were the state police, and they're rounding up anybody who is cutting their grass or talking to their neighbors in the front yard, and they're encouraging neighbors to call and tattle each other. This is, I mean, it's hard not to see this as part of an agenda for me, as part of an agenda to really, I think, is a communist globalist agenda to take over control over every aspect of our lives. If we lose our local governments, it's our local governments that protect us from that. We can't. So the sheriff's department is huge. I want a strong constitutional sheriff in my county. That's one of the requirements for me, as far as choosing where I want to live. I want a strong constitutional sheriff who believes both in rule of law and in protecting our liberties. And it's both are really, really important. And if we don't have that, then the state police is going to come in and fill that gap. And that's not, we can't hold them accountable. We can reelect if we don't like the way the job our sheriff is doing. We can talk to our sheriff. I have my sheriff's cell phone number. I can call my sheriff. We can, I'm fortunate to live in a small county where we can do that. But you can't. I mean, what control do I have over the state police? None at all. We can vote to elect a new sheriff, but we can't vote to elect a new head of the state police. I mean, really. I mean, we can vote. It's not even there. But even worse is the courts. I mean, there's a lot of complaints about courts being corrupt and judges making bad decisions, especially in higher courts where we don't have that ability to really to hold judges accountable by reelecting them or by electing somebody else or a replacement. But here locally, we could do that. And if you starve local government, you're going to starve the courts, you're going to starve the sheriff's department. Most of our budget in my county, by far the biggest expense is the sheriff's department. The second is the courts. And you starve those out, then what's going to happen is tyranny is going to come in and control our county. And it would be absolutely terrible. And that is one thing that would cause me, and I think many, many other people, it would make Michigan an unlivable state. It would make us like California.
Yeah, there's been places in California where that's had to happen, and it's always a bad result. I mean, the where do you think you find more fraud? At the local level, the state level, or the federal level? It's axiomatic. The further you get away, the more fraud you have, period.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, where do you have the most control? It's axiomatic. It's closer to home, right? So keep as much of it close to home as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Give as little as you can to Lansing and Washington. That's the strategy.
Yeah.
Without question, that's the strategy. And Scott, were you with us I think you were at the RNC convention last year? Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you attended, but to segue to this is what I do. I'd love to have people work on. So we had an opportunity to hear from the OG of tax reform. He was basically the person in Ronald Reagan's ear as they cut taxes through his administration. And his name is Grover Norquist. Grover Norquist runs an organization called Americans for Tax Reform. And his famous saying is, I don't want to get rid of government. I want to make it small enough that I can drown it in the bathtub. Right? That's his thing, right? And he's a funny guy, and but what else does he have? He's got a track record of success. Mm-hmm. And I want to say, he showed us a map, and I want to say it was like 16-ish states where he has successfully led ballot initiatives to reduce and ultimately eliminate state income taxes. And to be clear, what's fascinating about this, it's not a right-left thing. It's a thing, right? Because guess what? That drives a lot of the right incentives. So you've got places like Florida and Texas and Tennessee, but you've also got places like Washington. Washington's a pretty blue state. They have no state income tax. Why do they have no state income tax? Who are their biggest employers? Microsoft and Boeing. Mm-hmm. Microsoft and Boeing are willing to relocate to blue state Washington because there's no state income tax. If we want business growth in this state, do that. And they've done it several different ways. They've done it on the abolition way, right? Which is a big pill to swallow. But their primary method, what he talked to us about, was a ballot initiative for a gradual reduction. Okay, let's go back to the same numbers we talked about. Okay, so in the last year again, we're talking about half of the money coming in because half of it's Medicaid money. So state income tax for us is about $13 billion. Okay. So if we want to cut that, we want to eliminate that, then you would do something like this. You would say, we're going to cut by 0.25%. Right now we're paying stupidly 4.25% because Dana Nessel and Gretchen Whitmer and the Democrats cheated. Remember, it was supposed to go down to 4.05. That was already in place. Unfortunately, whoever drafted the trigger was budget surpluses, which of course don't exist, right? We spend everything we bring in, except for the COVID year where we were going to have a budget surplus, and they ran out and spent all the money and then declared the income rate hasn't moved. So you have great evidence as to why you need to do this. And you say you take it down, 4.25, 4.0, 3.75, and you do it gradually. And you know why you do that? Because as the state grows, if you take the tax rate down by 20 basis points a year, that's 5%, right? 40 basis points would be 10%, 5%. So if you grow in this state 5%, your tax revenue is flat. Okay. Even though you've got a bigger base and a lower number, right? So now everybody has an incentive to do what? Grow the state.
That's right.
Grow, get businesses and people coming into this state to grow it. And the next year, and the next year, and the next year. Okay, we don't have the advantages of Florida. We don't have massive tourism taxes that can supplant everything. So it's a little bit different. As my understanding is, the tax effort that's going on in Florida is a state property tax they want to eliminate, which in Michigan, you're paying a portion of your taxes go to the state for education, back into the state, a school aid fund, and then back to your local school district. So we really don't have a state property tax that is paid to the state and nothing more.
That's right.
Okay. So the correct strategy, in my opinion, and it's backed up by this guy who's been doing this for 40 years and is the godfather of this stuff, is to work to put that on the ballot, because those are extremely popular. It's very popular to say, we're going to ask the state government to tighten its belt slowly over time, and we're going to use that to rebalance sort of what we're doing here. That's the way to do it. And I wish that he was there. And it's funny, we were actually talking about no tax on tips, and true story, I whispered in his ear, there's 5 of us, I'm not making this up. I said to him, the next logical step is, right? And he says, what? I said, no taxes on overtime. And he looks at me and he goes, that's fascinating. I said, hey, we're Michigan, man. We got a state of auto workers. A lot of guys love their overtime. And when you think about it theoretically, right? If I've done my 40, my straight 40, I've paid what I've asked the state to pay me. Why should I pay more taxes if I'm willing to work harder? So it had a logical thing. Mm-hmm. We'll see how it turns out. I mean, there's a little bit of here, a little bit there, but it's a great start. It's a great start.
So you actually had something to do with that being included, you think?
I had to go back to like 4 or 5 different people. Like, do you remember that? Like, yeah, I remember that. So, and I like cut and pasted my own email, and like I just make sure I saved it. I don't care. I have no pride of authorship. I want it done. Yeah. Okay. I would love to have people say, man, I'd love to, I hate summers. It's too hot. I'd love to retire to Michigan. They don't have any income tax in Michigan. Can you imagine that? Mm-hmm. Right? Can you imagine a situation where people are like, you know what? I'm going to go up to my retirement home in Traverse City or Alpena or blah, 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 blah. And we had that going for us because there's no reason why we can't. Mm-hmm. There's no reason. And we need to stop. The Democrats are filled with idiotic ideas. And some of them, we're letting them run, and they're running into walls. Boys and girls sports, open mm-hmm. borders, all this crazy stuff. So when we have an opportunity now to be the party of sanity, let's do the same thing. And the same thing is, let's cut our income taxes for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And this question right here, Rob, I think this is a great question, and you can answer this in your own city, township, county, wherever you live. Go on in, find your local commissioner, and ask them to show you your local budget and pour over it, look over it, look for waste, look for fraud, look for abuse, find out where that money goes, find out how that money's spent. You can do this as a citizen. This is all public information. You can go in, you can find out how that money is spent in your community. And I strongly suggest you do that. It is extremely enlightening. And I actually think it'll change your life if you do that.
And I'll say this, Rob, they want you to do this.
Yeah.
Okay. So absolutely. I live in Northville. I was on the Northville School Board, and we would get all the time parents who had a particular expertise in a particular field. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they would come in and they would lend a hand and give us something that was better than we were going to get otherwise. We had this crazy problem with a school and the drop off and the pickup. It was in the streets or whatever. And we tried to do it ourselves, and we laid this all out. And this guy stands up and says, I just had to let you know everything you've done is wrong. And I know because I'm a traffic flow engineer, and I'd be happy to redesign your parking lot for free. And we went, come on up. And he did, and it was perfect. And we would have wasted $1 million easy, $1 million easy.
Yeah.
They want you to help them find cost savings. I always
Absolutely.
said this, one of the coolest things that would happen, you want to put Doge on steroids, open it up to the public with
Mhm.
what's called KETAM. I don't have any lawyer. KETAM is the ability to earn basically like not a referral fee, but like to get a payment for saving money for the state, right? So if
Mhm.
you are a person and you know there's Medicare fraud, you can report it, and the government has given you an incentive to report it by giving you a share of it.
Mhm.
Open up the federal government to key tam for everything. Watch
Wow.
people pour over this stuff. The $10,000 hammer, right? That's gone because
Mhm.
somebody's out there is going to say, I can get 10 hammers at Home Depot for $12.59 a piece, and you're going to save $400,000. Write me a check. And
Right.
if you did that, but your local government wants your help doing that
Mhm.
because they don't have that expertise. So they want your help digging in and saying, hey, man, I noticed your lawnmower guy he's charging you double what anyone charges in town. Your county commissioner, your local supervisor, they may not know that. They want your help. So dig in locally, get those darn costs down. And then when you get those costs down, they're not coming to you for tax increases. We
Mhm.
built a $40 million public safety building in Northville with no tax increase because we knew it was coming. We knew we wanted it.
Mhm.
And we're going to shuffle the things around so we can get this without going back and asking for more tax revenue. It happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that surprised me is that despite all of the stories about how local corruption, how bad local government is, I've had plenty of people that have disagreed with me on things, and I tend to step on toes, and I'm that kind of dancer too. I'll step on toes. But um, the what surprised me the most is that our county is actually very well run, and I mean they do a lot of things really well, and there's a lot of people there that really do have a heart to serve the community, and they're doing the best that they can with what they have, and I suspect that that's not just unique to my county. There's problems everywhere too, but there's a lot of good that's happening, and I think that the biggest reason why there's such this, why people are because people are being manipulated emotionally in order and to accept this idea that's just a fundamentally bad idea, and they're taking this idea that we need to abolish all local property taxes, and they're doing that based on solely emotional arguments without thinking through the ramifications like we've been doing here.
All right. Let me
What are the trade-offs? Where's the money coming from? What would be the rational, logical conclusion of actually going forward with this plan? And it's not good. There is really nothing good about it. Now, if you want to talk about one of their emotional arguments as well, old people lose their homes to foreclosure. Okay, then
Well, there's been a
maybe
change in the law recently that I guess didn't make it up to these people.
okay.
Okay, so very important to know. There was a United States Supreme Court case and a Michigan Supreme Court case that both said after one of them I think was in Oakland County, very egregious. I think the guy owed like 259 bucks or something, and they took his house and sold it. And that was the rule. Okay, my fundamental practice area is in commercial real estate, so I know this rule really, really well. And that was the rule. The United States Supreme Court and the Michigan Supreme Court both ruled that that was effectively a taking and
Mhm.
that you had to compensate that person. So now, if they take your house and they sell it for $200,000 for a $2,000 tax bill, you're getting a check for $198,000. Number one, that's not a
Right,
thing. Okay.
right.
Number two, again, like we talked about, property taxes in Michigan are what's called in rem, Latin for against the thing. They are taxes against your house. Okay.
Right.
If you're, for example, if you got a $10,000 tax bill on your house and a tornado comes through and wipes your house and it's no longer there, do you have to pay that tax bill or can you walk away from it? You can walk away from it. You don't own property anymore, but you can walk away from it.
Right.
We get a contra example is your income tax, sales tax, gas tax, all those other taxes. Those are called in personam. They attach to the person.
Right.
So if you don't pay your income tax, they're Liam Neeson and Taken. I will find you and I will kill you, right? That is what they do. right?
Mhm.
They will find your house, your car, your accounts, your personal property, everything they can. So
Right.
why, if that was your strongest argument, it's not, but if that was your strongest argument, why would you shift from an in rem tax to an in personam tax? That does not make any sense.
Right. Yep. Great points, both of those. And yeah, and actually that whole argument, because that was one of Carla's primary arguments to me. That
Yeah, and I
and
get it has great emotional appeal, right? It has
right,
great emotional appeal. My,
right.
my my father passed away last year. He's on a fixed income. He's a teacher who on a teacher pension, and he's got to drop an increasingly large number for his property tax bill. What I would tell him is, old man, you shouldn't have given to Democrats, which I did before he died. Um, and I would say, look, we got to get that down. The solution to that problem is not shifting it to another tax that is a challenge. And just we can't avoid the math. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And you cannot replace $17 billion in revenue with $2.6 billion in money from the budget. It just
Right.
doesn't work.
And so in order to do that, if this were to pass, if they were in order to raise another $15 billion, which is what they'd have to do, how much would, and I mean, really the only place that could come from, because you can't, I mean, there's definitely a limit to how much you can raise sales tax. It would
Well, I
have
mean,
to come from income tax.
I did the sales tax math, so I can help you with that one. So
Okay.
let's say I wanted to replace the $17 billion in missing income or property tax revenue with sales tax. So the
Hmm.
sales tax last year brought in about 12. Okay, so how we now have to take that from 12 to 29. Okay, so the
Right.
answer is something in the 14-15% range in order to make that work. Okay. If it sounds familiar, I don't know if it doesn't sound familiar to you, but it sounds familiar to me. In the state of Vermont, um, under the tutelage of Bernie Sanders, they decided they wanted to do a tax to pay for universal health care. Okay. Again,
Hmm.
emotional argument. Great. Everyone deserves free healthcare. Whatever. I don't agree, but whatever. And therefore we should do X or Y. The tax was going to be something absurd like 20%. And they
Hmm.
concluded, well, all our businesses will flee if we do that. Correct.
Right.
Yeah, Jason, you ultimately would eliminate the property tax or the income tax over time.
Hmm.
My point is that aiming at property taxes is aiming at the wrong place.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. 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 Um, and yeah, and that's the thing about, I mean, what that would happen. I mean, you're talking about raising sales tax to almost 30%, and that would be the ones that would hurt the most is the poor. I mean, in the end, somebody who lives in a very inexpensive house or even an apartment is paying a very small amount of property tax compared to what they would be paying just on their groceries and on the clothes for their kids and whatever other needs they have in sales tax.
Well,
They'd end up paying a lot more, and then like you said, they have no choice with that because those are taxes on the person, not on the property.
correct. And the other thing to point out is that Michigan is not unique, but Michigan is one of several states that has two important statutory limits on your property tax.
Right.
Number one is it cannot increase more than the rate of inflation over any year. Number one, and number two, that there's the requirement that you take any taxes to people before voting. Now, I have two brothers that live in Cook County, Illinois. Neither of those two rules apply. You want
Mm-hmm.
bad property taxes? Here's what they do. They calculate how much they need at the end of a given year. This is the revenue we need. They divide by their property value, and that's your new tax. You don't like
Mm-hmm.
it? Stuff it.
Right.
And so people don't understand, prior to 1994, when Proposal A and the Headley Amendment passed, that's exactly how it would work, right? Local places could pass their own taxes, and that's how the taxes went, and that changed. And those are two very substantial restrictions: the capping,
Mm-hmm.
the non-transfer capability, and the Headley Amendment as well.
Mm-hmm. So famous guy says so many better plans than AxMITax. For example, I've been pitching that millages should only be voted on in November of presidential elections and midterms. My state rep never bothered with the idea, but I think that's a good idea. I
That's a
mean,
great idea.
and
That's a great idea.
and the reason for that is because you get far greater turnout in those elections, and so you're getting a lot larger sample of the people that actually care. It's much easier to manipulate the outcome of a local election in an off year, and especially an off, non-November election when people just don't turn out to vote. And so you can get the strong advocates for a particular millage to get out and vote. I think that would be a good proposal.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind is one of the reasons why that would be another reason why that would be a great proposal is you get limited bites of the apple.
Right.
Okay, because what
Right.
school districts do, particularly, and I used to sit down. We never had that happen, right? Um, but they'll do is they'll go and they'll put one out and it'll lose and they'll run right back out to the next election and
Mm-hmm.
they'll try it again. And I think Farmington did 4 in a row before taking the word no.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had to wait 2 years before the next one of the things you would do when we passed our last bond, it was crazy transparent. We
Mm-hmm.
bid out every job to the extent that we could. We put them on a chart. We let the public, do you think this one should go up or down or whatever? We told the public, hey, there's some things that are at the bottom. Maybe we pull them up if we save money along the way, maybe, right? And that was all wide open, right? You have to demonstrate to the public that you do not have another source of money, that you have tried everything that you can. You're going to tell the public exactly what you're going to do with the tax dollar,
Mm-hmm.
and then you ask their permission. If you do
Right.
all those 4 things and you've made the case, then you get the opportunity. But that's not what they do now in some of these areas. They give half answers. They lie. They well, we'll figure it out later. They miss wildly like Taylor did. It
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Right. Right. Um, and that's good governance. I mean, that transparency, accountability, open, clear communication with the public. Those things are, setting up expectations and then meeting those expectations. Um, that is good governance, and that's something that I think we should all strive for. And that's the reason why I mean, instead of going out and getting signatures on something that you haven't really thought through, it would be so much better to spend that time getting engaged in I'm going to city council meetings or county commission meetings or whatever it is locally, and working with, and just picking up the phone, even just a 15-minute phone call to your county commissioner, and which you should be able to do.
Yeah,
And
and like I said, they want it. They would
yeah,
love to have more input. It's like a boring presentation, and they have no back and forth. Right?
right,
They want to hear it. I've laid out this budget. What do you think?
right,
Right? Hey, I got these problems. All right,
right,
great. Let's talk them through. Maybe
right,
you're right. Maybe you find something. And
right,
a lot of times they do. A lot of times say, hey, I didn't know that was a thing.
yeah,
Right? And the other thing I would say to your audience is if you're really enthusiastic about this, if you're really digging into it, have you considered running for office?
mm-hmm,
Because there are a lot of places in this state where we need people who are busybodies, right?
right,
Right, left, center. One of the biggest complaints people have is the rubber stamps,
mm-hmm,
right? Right, left, center. Go and run. Be a busybody. Ask questions. Demand answers,
mm-hmm,
right? Because those people provide good governance. The people that show up with a little placard and it says, Matt Wilk, school board, right? And that's all they really care about. They don't effectuate any change. But
right,
if you walk in there, you're like, hey, man, I looked at these numbers and these don't seem to add up. Like I'm
right,
in the X field and I have no idea why you're playing 400% X to get something done.
mm-hmm,
Sometimes it's because they just don't, they haven't been paying attention. So if you are enthused about it, great, awesome, go run for office.
right,
There are
right,
resources to help you do that, and we'd love to have you do that.
right, right. Um, Kelly Sackett says, you should have Kenny Clevenger on, as he's a township treasurer. He spoke at the Kalamazoo GOP coffee yesterday about there being a poverty mechanism as well as homeowners can apply for it and they will not. And um, I, I do believe that. Do you know more about that? I
Yeah,
have heard that there
some
is.
counties do things to keep you in your home.
Right. Right.
Right? They'll have programs to not for sales tax. You walk
Mm.
into the local grocer and say, I got $100 for the groceries, but I can't afford the 6% sales tax. They're not helping you,
Yeah, no, it doesn't work.
right? It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Income tax, it doesn't work that way
Right.
because when the government looks for its income tax, they know how much income you made.
Mm.
So, so yeah, there are resources available, but again, because they're local, because they understand, right?
Hmm.
They're in your same boat.
Yep. 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 And um, and this is actually interesting too. Landlords listing to their tenants saying, this is the total rent and this is the breakdown, this is how much of your rent is actually going towards property taxes. And that's interesting. I don't know how practical that is on a granular level, but
They could do
and
that if they
and
want. They
that
could do
is
that if they
something,
want. In some places they do. In
right,
some places they, especially when there is a big increase.
right,
So if
right.
I'm a landlord, like I said, this is what I do for a living, right? So if there's a big increase in your total payment, which is your rent plus all the other expenses, you tell
Mm.
them,
Oh
hey,
yeah.
by the way, you're paying 1,200 a month in rent. It's now 1,350. But don't look at me. The insurance went from this to this. Nothing happened to us, and our insurance went up. And my taxes went from this to this because commercial property is taxed at a substantially higher rate than residential property, and
Hmm.
that does not mean owner occupied property.
Hmm.
Owner occupied property is has a
The
18
homestead
mil
example. Yeah.
discount. The PRE is 18 mils. So that's pretty substantial. So if in my township, I pay 53. It's on my last bill. So it'd be 71 if it was commercial. So it's
Hmm.
a big number. It's a big
Hmm.
number. And that's another example of, if you want a little microcosm of what it is. Commercial landowners don't vote because they own they vote where they live, not vote where
Hmm.
they own.
That's right.
Do you think it's difficult for people to pass commercial property tax things? It is not.
Right.
And it used to be prior to 1994. That's precisely what they would do.
Hmm.
They would go in and say, "We need more money. We're taxing all these people that don't live here. All in favor, say aye." Right? Everyone's dead. And Headley in 1994 and Proposal A said, "Nah, you can't do that anymore." So there's already some guide rails on. I just wish, again, these people are trying real hard. They're all well-meaning. There's some great patriots in that group, great patriots, people who are working real hard. Please refocus your energies in any one of these other directions. We have voter ID that is going to be on the ballot. Okay, we need those signatures to do
Yeah.
that. These are very simple things.
Yep.
Do you need a voter ID? Do you need to prove that you're a citizen to go forward? That was just approved. Revised language was just approved, I think, Friday, right?
Hmm.
We have to defeat things like ranked choice voting, right? That's
Yep.
a big
Yep.
problem. It
Yep.
went down in red states and blue state last year, but is not guaranteed. So work on that, right? Focus that great energy you have, harness it, and put it in a little bit of a different direction.
And support candidates. I mean,
Or
we are
candidate.
facing such uh, a tremendously important election next year,
Yeah.
and
I mean, we're gonna have big primaries for
yeah,
Senate, governor, House races,
yep,
state house, state senate. My particular area has been state senate redistricted, so we got new borders this year to deal
right,
with. Yeah, we got a lot of things to worry about. Democrats still have a lot of money. I think we still have the people,
hmm,
right? We need to get those people focused on things that are necessary to win.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining. I think this was enlightening for me, and I think it was enlightening for everybody that was here live. I'm going to post this on my Substack, biggertruthmedia.com. How can people find you on social media if they have any questions or want to talk more?
The easiest way is through Twitter. MJW Go Blue is my Twitter handle. You can reach out to me from there. I'm the president of the Northville Republicans Club, which is northville-mi.gop. We came off a magnanimous, just beautiful July 4th parade
Mm.
where we had about 30 people. And we just by random chance were two cars behind the Democrats, and I think they had five. No patriotic gear, And
Wow.
I want to share this with you because this is so powerful. It was to me. I had a woman who walked with me with her son, and I believe she is Russian. Okay. And she said, Matt, I want to thank you for inviting me. It felt, it made me feel great to be an American.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I was like, cut, paste, frame. That's why we
Yeah,
do this. That's
that's
why we
awesome.
do this. Because when people seek freedom,
Yeah,
they seek us.
yeah, yeah. And it's where freedom and personal responsibility come together.
That's right.
And um
And
and
in this
that's
and in
yeah.
this case, plus Neil Diamond and James Brown pumping music too, that helps.
Because that is just awesome. So happy summer, everyone. Happy 4th of July. Matt, thank you so much for all of this. And thank you all for joining us live. So until next time, thanks a lot.